In 1967, Colorado signed a contract to dig 1 7/10 of a mile of hole under the Continental Divide. 3 years and just over $54 million. That hole is the Eisenhower Tunnel, and it carries Interstate 70 through the mountains west of Denver. It took 5 years. It cost about $108 million. Along the way, the state bought a machine the size of a building, built to chew through the mountain and hold the roof up at the same time. And that machine moved a few yards and stopped and never really worked again. The east portal of that tunnel sits at 11,013 feet. There is no higher point anywhere on the Interstate Highway System. And directly above the roof, close enough that you can see it from the parking lot, is the pass they were trying to avoid, Loveland Pass, 11,990 feet. What nobody knew in 1967 was that the mountain they had been studying for a quarter of a century was not the mountain they were about to dig. To understand how a 3-year job turns into a 5-year job, you have to understand why Colorado refused to just go over the top. And to understand that, you have to drive the pass. Loveland Pass, Colorado, 1962. This is the only way across the divide here, and it is 2 lanes of asphalt that were not paved until 1949 and 1950. The climb runs at a steady 6.7% grade, not a short pitch, a grade that holds mile after mile while the air thins out around your engine. There are hairpin turns on the way up and hairpin turns on the way down, cut into open tundra above the tree line, with Arapahoe Basin off one shoulder and a drop off the other. In good weather, in daylight, in a car, it takes the better part of an hour to get from one side to the other. Now put yourself in a loaded truck in February. You are climbing at 6.7% with a full trailer at 11,000 feet, where your engine is making a fraction of the power it makes in Denver. Then you crest, and the whole problem inverts. Everything that was working against you going up is now pushing you down the far side, and the only thing standing between you and the bottom is a brake system that is heating up with every turn. Snow removal on that road means plowing switchbacks in the dark, in wind, above the tree line. Colorado had been running commercial traffic over that pass for decades. It worked. It just did not work reliably, and it did not work fast. And by the early 1960s, reliably and fast had become the entire point. Because an interstate is not just a wider road. An interstate is a promise written into the federal design standards about how steep a grade may be, how tight a curve may be, and how many days a year the road is open. Loveland Pass fails all 3. You cannot straighten a hairpin that is pinned between a rock wall and a 1,000-foot drop. You cannot flatten a 6.7% grade without moving the mountain. And you cannot promise a trucking company in Grand Junction that the road to Denver is open in January when the road to Denver is a tundra crossing at 12,000 feet. The official number for what the tunnel saves you is 9.1 miles. That number undersells it completely. 9 miles is nothing. The real saving is the difference between a road that is open and a road that might be. No shoulder to spare, no gentle radius, no guarantee it is open tomorrow. So they went looking for a way under. They had been looking for a long time before the interstate system existed. Between 1941 and 1943, while the country was at war, crews drove an exploratory bore under Loveland Pass. It was finished in May of 1943. It carried no traffic. It was never meant to. It was a hole driven into a mountain for the single purpose of finding out what was inside the mountain. That is worth sitting with. 2 years of wartime labor spent underground to answer a question. The question was whether the rock under the Continental Divide would hold a tunnel. 20 years later, they asked it again, at a different spot, and this time they asked it properly. In October of 1963, Colorado contracted for a pilot bore at the site of the future tunnel on the Straight Creek side of the divide. A Houston outfit called Mid-Valley drove it. They holed through in about 14 months, finishing on the 3rd of December, 1964. And then the United States Geological Survey, working with the Colorado Department of Highways, did something genuinely careful with it. They built a statistical model of the rock at tunnel depth and used it to predict what the main tunnel would hit, how much of each rock type, how heavy the loads on the supports would be, how far apart the steel sets would need to stand, how much grout it would take, how much water would come in. Then they compared the predictions to what the pilot bore actually found. They were right. The rock types came in close to prediction. The predicted loads matched the measured loads. The survey published the whole thing as a success story, a worked example of geologic projection done properly, which is exactly what it was. And that is the detail that makes everything after it hurt. The same study that proved the mountain was predictable is the study that let them put a price on it. Colorado's original estimate for the tunnel was $42,479,000. Bids opened in October of 1967. A joint venture called Straight Creek Constructors won it on the 3rd of October at just over $54 million. Mining began on the 15th of March, 1968 at the Straight Creek Portal on the west side of the divide, near what is now Silver Plume and Georgetown on the Denver approach. The schedule said 3 years. Here is what is actually inside that mountain. Roughly 75% of it is granite. The remaining quarter is gneiss and schist, which are the layered, foliated rocks that split along their own grain instead of behaving like a solid block. In the pilot bore, 820 feet of what they drove through was logged as bad rock. Only about 26.5% of that bore stood up by itself. The other 73.5% needed support to stay open. Those two numbers are the mountain telling them the truth before they started. Nearly 3/4 of the ground under the Continental Divide would not hold its own weight. They knew that. They had priced it. They had steel sets designed for it. So why did a mountain that had been studied for 25 years still take them by surprise? Because the pilot bore and the main tunnel are not the same hole. The main alignment crossed a fault zone that the pilot bore never touched. Faulted, fractured granite, schist soaked with groundwater, ground that did not simply need support, ground that moved while men were standing in it and forced emergency work to keep the roof from coming in on the crews. Rube Hopper was the tunnel district engineer. In 1973, looking back on it, he said one sentence that has followed the project ever since. "We were going by the book," he said, "but the damned mountain couldn't read." Now understand what bad ground actually means, because the picture in your head is almost certainly wrong and the real one is worse. In ordinary rock, tunneling is a rhythm. You drill the face, you blast, you muck out the broken rock, you set steel to hold what you have opened, then you do it again and again, and the hole you made yesterday is still the hole you made yesterday. In squeezing ground, the hole does not stay put. The rock does not fall on you. That is the part people get wrong. It presses. It closes in from every direction at once, slowly, continuously, with the entire weight of a mountain behind it, and it does not stop when you install the steel. It keeps pressing. Steel sets engineered to hold a predicted load take on a load nobody predicted, and they deform. They twist out of shape while they are standing there doing their job. You are inside a hole, half a mile under the Continental Divide, and the hole is getting smaller. The answer to that, at least the answer they bought, was a machine. Straight Creek constructors put money into a mining shield, a moving steel carapace designed to drive forward through unstable ground and hold the roof up over the crew at the same time. The version that made it into the local record weighed 450 tons. On paper, it was exactly right for the problem. Bad ground going in one end, finished tunnel coming out the other. The ground was bad. It was not the specific kind of bad the shield was built for. The machine bogged down after a few yards, and that was effectively the end of it. On that job, for years afterward, mining shields stopped being a piece of equipment and became a word people used for a very expensive mistake. The machine bought to beat the mountain became the proof the mountain could not be beaten that way. The contractor did not survive the fault zone. The first firm on the job went bankrupt inside it. That is not a figure of speech about cost overruns. A construction company signed a fixed price to move a mountain, met ground that no fixed price could have covered, and was destroyed by the difference. In November of 1970, with the tunnel behind schedule and past its budget, Gibbons & Reed came in as the prime contractor, and the remaining mining was shifted onto what the industry calls force account. Force account changes the entire nature of the project. Under a fixed price, the contractor carries the risk of the unknown. Under force account, the state stops buying a finished tunnel at an agreed number and starts buying labor, equipment, and materials by the hour as they are used. Colorado had stopped purchasing a hole in a mountain. Colorado had started renting the fight. The decision underneath that switch was simple, and it was correct. The clever way had failed. The best way left was the hard way. So consider the size of the hard way. At peak, 1,140 people were working that tunnel. 3 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, at 11,000 feet above sea level, where the air holds about 2/3 of the oxygen it holds at the coast. Across the 5 years, close to 6,000 people cycled through the job. The total labor came to roughly 4.9 million man-hours. Picture the commute. You drive up the Straight Creek drainage in the dark in January to a portal at 11,000 feet to spend 8 hours inside rock that is actively trying to close. That mountain takes an average of 26 feet of snow between November and April. 26 feet on top of the thing you are already tunneling under. They worked it in shifts through 5 winters of that. 3 of them did not come out. 3 men died driving the Eisenhower bore. When Colorado came back 6 years later and drove the second bore alongside it, the Edwin C. Johnson bore, 4 more died there. 7 men total for 2 holes through 1 mountain. And here is the part that should sit badly with you. The count is in the public record. The names are not. Not in the Transportation Department's history pages, not in the Federal Highway histories, not in the anniversary coverage that comes around every 10 years with the photographs and the archive footage. 7 is a number that survived. 7 people did not. The mountain kept its own ledger, and it was the only party to this contract that never went a dollar over budget. The job could have stayed exactly what it was: a hole, a crew, a schedule that kept slipping. In November of 1970, a woman named Janet Bonema applied to the Colorado Highway Department. She sat the state examination for engineering technician and placed 5th. 5th in the state, on the test, on the merit. The letter that came back was addressed to Mr. Jamet P. Bonema. Somewhere in the paperwork, her first name had been misread, and the department had assumed it was hiring a man. When they realized their mistake, the tunnel work turned into a drafting desk. She could have the title, she could do the drawings, she could not go into the bore where the work she was hired to do was actually happening. The reason was not a safety regulation. There was no engineering standard anywhere that said a woman could not stand in a tunnel. The reason was a mining superstition older than the highway department and older than Colorado, that a woman underground brings the roof down on the men working there. That is what stood between a woman who had placed 5th on the state exam and the job she had earned: a belief about luck. She spent about a year and a half working outside a hole she was qualified to work inside. Then, in 1972, she sued. She asked for $100,000 and for the right to do the work. She never got a trial. In November of 1972, Colorado voters amended the state constitution to guarantee equal rights, and the state settled rather than argue the other side of it in front of a judge. Her own account of what the job actually was is plainer than any of the coverage. "I am not allowed to do the same work as the male engineering technicians," she said, "even though I am physically able, in better condition, and have more stamina than many." On the 9th of November 1972, she walked into the bore. She wore overalls, which she described afterward as a good disguise. A woman reporter from the Denver Post walked in with her. Between 66 and 100 men walked off the job. The accounts differ on the exact count, and it is worth saying so, rather than picking the number that sounds best. Work stopped. The walkout cost somewhere around $10,000 of production on a project that was already years late and tens of millions over. Almost every one of them was back at the portal the next morning. Nothing fell. The roof did not come in. The superstition, tested directly in front of a reporter on the 9th of November 1972, simply failed to happen. Janet Bonema spent the rest of the project doing the job she had sat the exam for: recording measurements, collecting rock samples, producing the technical drawings of what the fault was doing to the tunnel around her. She had been born in South Denver in 1938. She died in 2008 at 69. For most of the time they were digging it, the thing did not have a president's name on it. It was the Straight Creek Tunnel, named for the creek running down the west side of the divide, which is the sort of name a road project gets when nobody expects it to become famous. The design contract had been signed on the 23rd of February, 1966, 2 years before a single round was blasted. Then, in March of 1969, Dwight Eisenhower died. That September, Colorado's governor, John Love, proposed putting his name on the bore, and by 1972 it was official. The reasoning was direct enough. Eisenhower is the president who signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, the law that created the interstate system, the law without which nobody is standing at 11,000 feet arguing with a fault zone. He had spent his own career convinced that America could not move itself, first as a young officer on the Army's transcontinental convoy in 1919, then in Germany looking at the Autobahn. The highest point on the system he built now carries his name. The second bore, when it came, took the name of Edwin C. Johnson. Big Ed Johnson had been Colorado's lieutenant governor, its governor, and its United States senator, and for decades he had pushed for exactly this, a way through the divide that did not depend on the weather. He did not live to drive it. So two men who spent their political lives arguing that the country should be able to move ended up with their names on two holes in the same mountain, and neither of them ever swung a hammer in either one. The tunnel opened on the 8th of March, 1973. It was 34 degrees at the ceremony. 4,660 cars went through on the first day. By that July, 1 million vehicles had used it. 5 years for a 3-year job, somewhere around $108 million against an estimate of 42.5. And even that figure is contested. Some accounts put the final number as high as 116 or 117 million, depending on what you count as part of the tunnel and what you count as approach road, ventilation, and portal structure. At the time, the federal share of it was the largest sum ever committed to a single federal aid highway project in the country. Colorado did not buy a tunnel. Colorado rented 1.5 miles of mountain by the hour at whatever price the mountain decided to name. What they got for it is genuinely hard to overstate. About 1 million cubic yards of rock came out of that bore, and 190,000 cubic yards of concrete went back in as lining. Every foot of that hole is a manufactured object. Across the whole project, both bores together, they moved something on the order of 2.5 million cubic yards of rock, poured 400,000 cubic yards of concrete, and set more than 70,000 tons of steel into the mountain to keep it where it was. When it opened, it was the highest vehicular tunnel on Earth, and it held that for years. The clearance through it is 13 feet and 11 inches, which is why an overheight load still cannot use it, and why you will still see a truck turned around at the portal. And that clearance number is worth stopping on, because it exposes what this tunnel actually is. You drive through a space that is 13 feet and 11 inches tall and 26 feet wide, 2 lanes of 13 feet each. The hole they excavated to make that possible runs up to 48 feet tall and 40 feet wide. Do the subtraction. The part you drive through is a fraction of the whole. Most of that mountain was not taken out for cars at all. It came out for air. A road tunnel at 11,000 feet is not a hole with lights in it. It is a machine for moving atmosphere. 32,000 vehicles a day, each of them burning fuel and putting exhaust into a sealed rock tube 1.5 miles long in air that is already thin before anybody starts an engine. Nothing about that clears itself. The space above your roof is full of ducting, and the buildings at each portal exist to push clean air in and pull the rest of it out continuously forever. Of the 8,941 feet between the portals, only 7,789 feet is rock they tunneled through. The rest is ventilation structure and cut and cover work at the ends. The whole thing rises at 1.64% as you head west, which is the grade an interstate is allowed and the pass above you is not. That is the trade Colorado actually made. Not a shortcut, not 9 miles saved. They took a crossing that depended on the weather and replaced it with a crossing that depends on a fan. And that is why the staff of 52 are all trained firefighters, and why the ventilation runs whether there are cars in there or not. The mountain is no longer deciding whether the road is open. Something else is. By 2007, 32,260 vehicles were going through it every single day. By March of 2023, when the tunnel turned 50, more than 434 million vehicles had crossed the Continental Divide inside it. It runs with a permanent staff of around 52 people, and every one of them is trained as a firefighter, because a fire inside a bore at 11,000 feet with no exits is the one emergency that has no good version. The electric bill alone runs around $70,000 a month, and in more than 50 years of carrying the entire east-west traffic of Colorado, that tunnel has never killed a driver. And then Colorado had to do the whole thing again. What opened in 1973 was one bore, one tunnel carrying traffic in both directions with oncoming headlights a few feet away and a rock wall on either side. That is how Interstate 70 crossed the Continental Divide for the next 6 years and 9 months. Design work on a second bore had actually started in July of 1972, before the first one even opened, because everybody involved already knew what a single tube meant. The contract went out on the 11th of August, 1975, to Kiewit with Brown and Root at $102.8 million. Construction started a week later. Mining started that November. They had learned an enormous amount. They knew where the fault was. They knew what the ground did. They had the drawings that Janet Bonema and the rest of the technical staff had produced from inside the first hole, which is what those drawings were for. The second bore took slightly over 4 years instead of 5, and it opened on the 21st of December, 1979. 4 men died in it. That is the arithmetic of this crossing that nobody puts on a plaque. They dug it twice. They knew more the second time. They were faster the second time. And the second time cost more lives than the first. Here is the part almost nobody who drives it knows. The tunnel did not retire Loveland Pass. It could not. If you are hauling a placarded load of hazardous material, you are not allowed in that bore. Under Colorado's own rules, you take United States Highway 6 over the top, up the 6.7% grade, around the hairpins, across the tundra, 800 vertical feet above the roof of the tunnel that everyone else gets to use. Fuel, chemicals, compressed gas. The freight nobody wants to think about is the freight that is required to go over the mountain instead of through it. And when the pass itself closes, which it does, the state does not simply let those trucks in. It walks them through. The Transportation Department stages the waiting hazmat loads, gathers them, and escorts them through the bore in convoys, holding everyone else back while they pass. You have almost certainly sat in that hold. 15 minutes or so, stopped at the portal on the clear day with no crash ahead of you and no snow on the road, wondering what the delay is for. That is what it is for. That is 1943 and 1963 and 1970, all still on the schedule. They spent 30 years and 7 lives to get the traffic off that pass, and the most dangerous traffic on the road is still up there, running the grade above your head. So go back to the parking lot at the east portal and look at what is actually in front of you. 2 holes in a mountain, 11,013 feet at your feet, 12,000 feet of rock and snow above them, and a 2-lane road switchbacking over the top of the whole thing. From down there, it looks like a solved problem. A tunnel is the answer. The pass is the past, and the drive from Denver to Dillon takes 20 minutes. It is not a solved problem. It is a negotiated one. Colorado did not defeat the Continental Divide in 1973. It bought a lane under it at a price that started at $42 million and was set in the end by the mountain. And this is the number to take with you when you drive through it tonight. In 50 years, hundreds of millions of vehicles and not one dead driver. Every death that crossing owns belongs to the 7 men who dug it. The record that counts them does not name them.